It's EVE Online. Well, no, it's not. It's today in EVE Online, Monday, February 10th, 2020. I am Metterall. Let's look at what's going on today through the eyes of the iHubs, infrastructure hubs. There's a few things to note here. Most of them are in the Northern War area. You have the initiative in Cloud Ring. We'll see what happens there. That might be test. I'm not sure. But here's the stuff that I wanted to look at, and it is in Deckline and Tenal. You see Ranger Regimen has structures under attack. You also have Darkness. That's both these are dead coalition groups, and they own territory in Tenal and Deckline. And so it just looks like the war is reaching more systems in deeper regions. So the fight was in Tenal. I think it was, it was in Tenal, and now it's moving into Branch, and it's moving even deeper into Deckline, and it's happening a lot faster than we expected. So Dead Coalition needs some help there. They're starting to get some help from the Imperium. We'll look at some of those fleets in just a second. We'll try to get a war update from one of the FCs in just a minute. Moving over to statistics. We want to keep our eye on the Empire space while Outlaw space manages itself and gets into conflict. Looking at Venal here. It looks like there was just a fight there. Do I have the Venal? Yeah, so I took a closer look at this, and it's Fraternity is colliding with Goon Swarm, basically, or Fraternity is fighting with Imperium, the Imperium SIG Typhoons, which are missile platform battleships. It looks like this one was a tie, pretty much. So good for the Typhoons, looking to see if they actually get some traction. Since the missiles had a recent buff from CCP in the mechanics, they are a little more viable, and trying to see if the Typhoons can actually be a cheap way to deliver damage for the Imperium. Looking back at statistics, that's Venal. We see Deckline. There's some combat going on there in the last few hours. Over the last, that's the last 24 hours.
Sorry for being late.
Hey, how's it going, Killer B? Well, we're just going through some of the statistics right now, but maybe you can just cut to the chase and tell us what you think is going on there.
What statistics?
I'm looking at Venal, Tenal, Branch, Deckline, all the Northern War areas.
Areas, yeah.
Or
so what's going on? I guess today was a kind of big day, not in the sense that we did anything, but Sword Dragon announced that all of Deadco was going to retreat to White Tech 1918, which is a system that's bordering Deckline and Branch, the far border. There's two borders to Deckline and Branch, but they chose the one that goes into the very northern part of Deckline, basically. And then right after that announcement, there was also an alliance update from Siberian Squad, from Hanzo Viper, who's the leader of Siberian Squad and also their main FC, to Siberian Squad. And then in that statement, he kind of talked about the last couple of weeks and the timer in Venal that happened on, what time was that, Saturday? I can't remember. There was a big fight. When was that big fight over there, over the SBSQ fort in PF Tech? When was that? That was Saturday, right? I'm pretty sure. That was the day before TIS.
Yeah, I think it was, but I'm not sure.
Friday or Saturday, either way. He went a little bit into how he wasn't happy with his allies' commitment to that Fortizar timer. And he's been just writing it up. He was very honest in that SOTA and like in that alliance update for his members. He was very honest about everything. I was pretty surprised by that. But I've been saying that Siberian Squad has been the backbone of that coalition for this entire thing. They're by far the strongest alliance in the coalition. And I don't really understand why he still follows Sword Dragon around. I guess he's a loyal guy, which I respect even more, I guess. So it's fine. But it's certainly, I could see that they're getting to a point where, they're starting to ask these questions. Like, why keep bothering?
Right.
I wouldn't even blame them for it, but we'll have to see how these things develop. Obviously, this is just my interpretation of the update.
Yeah, so they're falling back to basically the end of branch, and you see this long pipe at the top. You can't see my mouse, but there's this very long jump from branch, which is in your top right, over to the left, which is decline. And the system that is near it, the last system in branch is the one where they're going to retreat to. So they're basically...
it's a very bad system to actually defend branch. And they've sort of, like Sword Dragon in his ping to his coalition basically said that they're giving up branch as well.
Yeah.
And Hanzo said that in his update as well. So it looks like they're just pulling everything back to Y1918 for now, and then they're probably going to proceed from there into decline, and they're just giving up on Tenal and branch entirely.
Yeah. But why retreat there? Just so you can slow down the advance or something?
No, because you don't want to take a regional gate unorganized, so you regroup all your troops in a system first, and then you do one really, really big coalition move up where they form everything up they have and go through that gate, because regional gates are inherently dangerous.
Yeah, interesting. So they're basically gathering to move into decline. They're giving up branch.
That's my interpretation of it, yes.
Yeah. Wow.
It's obviously nice for us. Like, that is very, very satisfying seeing that effort we've been putting into these timers have sort of paid off, especially the Venal fort, because technically that Fortizar in PF Tech wasn't important for Siberian Squad in any way. That wasn't a strategic fort, but it had a lot of value, sentimental value, or whatever you want to call it, in terms of just showing what everybody's able of committing, because for that time everybody formed as big as they could, right? Like there was Delfgoon fleet, there was the PF deployment SIG fleet, there was a big Siberian Squad / Darkness fleet, and was very little fleet, very small fleet from RR, and then we formed everything we had too. So it was definitely a time when it sort of opened some eyes, I guess.
Yeah. What were the numbers like?
Local was at like 3K. I think it was like 1.4 versus 1.5 or something like that. It was sort of even, but obviously we had an advantage because we dropped Supers and Titans in the middle of their subcapital fleets, and they couldn't escalate to that level.
Yeah. Any worries that the Imperium will have to scramble super capital fleet in order to really contend?
I mean, that has been the case, but they know that too. The Imperium, Asher 100% knows that there's no way they can actually stop our progress with what they have committed at the moment, and they can only stop us if they want to by bringing their super caps. But as of right now, I don't see that happening. This deployment for goons, their whole SIG and the PF Tech deployment itself, I think, was less about stopping us from making progress versus that coalition, and more of getting involved in the content, because goons had been blue balled for probably for 5 or 6 months prior to that. Every single time a goon showed up to, everybody just blue balled them, and that wasn't a coincidence. That was a coordinated thing, right? Make sure that we just blue ball the shit out of the goons on every timer. And obviously, with this deployment, we can't really do that, because we want to keep making progress. So we're gonna push our objectives, and then if goons show up to defend the objective or whatever, then we're gonna fight them, right? So at the end of the day, we're giving them what they want, which is content for their members, which is gonna get their numbers back up and everything, which is what they want, because their numbers have been pretty bad lately. But yeah, things have been picking up with their number-wise with this deployment already. Some of the fleets they formed, especially to be fair, yesterday was a Sunday, and people always form good fleets on Sunday, but yesterday they formed like basically unannounced. They just formed a Typhoon fleet and it was full, right? They had like 180 Typhoons. That was very impressive. So this deployment is definitely working for them, and I think that's fine. We're getting what we want, basically.
Yeah, I was looking at a Typhoon fleet happen in the last 24 hours in Venal. Went up against Horde. And
yeah, Horde. So Horde, in response to Goon's deployment to PF Tech, Horde has deployed their open SIG, which is called Partisans, or they renamed it now to, because the Goon SIG is called Goon Swarm Expeditionary Force or something, and Goblins renamed Partisans to Drone Region Expeditionary Force or something like that, as a little bit of a meme. And they deployed into PF Tech as well, right? So now there's a Horde SIG staged in PF Tech, and there's a Goon SIG staged in PF Tech. And the Horde Goblins was very open about the goal of that SIG. It was to fight goons as much as possible and just sort of get content as much as possible out of this whole thing. So that's definitely working for goons as well, because obviously there's a lot of newer FCs as well that are trying to get practice in Horde, and if you send a bit more experienced FCs into combat with them, you can get some pretty nice wins in. Mm-hmm. And also goons just form more people on average. Like, they have no problem whatsoever filling a fleet in prime time with the SIG at the moment, and in USTZ, pretty good numbers as well. Horde can't do that unless it's somebody big forming.
Right.
Like Alpha. But yeah, things are going well.
Yeah, this fight was about 300 on 300, 350 on 300, and it cut both ways. Typhoon fleet against, looks like mostly Feroxes, some Eagles in there.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, T1 versus T1 brawls are always fun because nobody really cares because the ships are so cheap and you can just brawl it out. You can just fight until one side stops killing stuff, and then you have to bring in more people and you go back in and shit like that. So that's why the perimeter fights were so much fun as well. Even though they happened in high sec, and the tie-dye was obviously awful, and all the high sec people wondering what's going on was pretty funny. But the perimeter fights were really cool because of that too, because everybody was just fielding giant Ferox fleets. Nobody really cared about because the ISK didn't really matter, right? So it was just a giant Ferox versus Ferox slugfest every time. It was pretty fun for a couple of weeks. Obviously, at some point it got boring because that's just what happens. But yeah, it's pretty good. I like the situation in the North at the moment.
Well, that's cool. It seems like there's a lot of activity. Something that was happening in the last 3 hours. A lot of things happened in the last 24 hours. Here's another.
Yeah, we've been killing some forts over the course of this day already. There was a faction fort. There's actually 2 faction forts that died earlier today. One before downtime and one at roughly 1400. 2 faction forts that belong to Ranger Regiment. And then we killed another regular fortizar just like an hour ago. That was undefended too. Like, all of these are undefended, right? So it's just grinding basically. But faction fort kill me, it's always nice for the members.
Yeah.
It's always something you can get people in fleet with.
What are they, like 25 to 40 billion per faction fort? This looks like, Goonswarm again, Typhoon fleet. This is the PF TAC Q in Venal system that you're talking about, where they're you were saying Imperium and Horde are in the same system?
Maybe Horde's next door. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure they deployed. I'm pretty sure that Horde deployed into PF as well, yes. In the same system, because there is a Fortis out there that Horde has, for sure. But Horde might be in HD next door. I'm not entirely sure, but I think it's the same, to be honest.
Yeah, same area. Well, that's great. Yeah, it seems to be a lot of activity, which is kind of cool because these fights look reasonable as far as size. Like, this one is, this one's more of a skirmish, 25 on 11. But it looks like Horde got the best of them because they...
I had a really fun time yesterday trying to defend, or not trying, we did defend a Horde Raitaru in Vienna as well that goons showed up to kill with a Jackdaw fleet. And the Horde FC, there was a Horde Harpy fleet, and then I was there with Chemo Lokis, which are basically cloaky, nullified Lokis with smart bombs. And you just wait for the Jackdaw fleet to warp up to a ping, and when they're all bunched up, you warp in on them. They don't see you coming because you cloaked, and you decloak last second, you smart bomb them all to death. And the Horde FC of the Harpy fleet, he got headshot very, very early on into the fight, and he was kind of sad about it. So I told him, bro, if you want to redeem yourself, you can send your Harpy fleet to just scram the Jackdaw anchor, and then I will warp in with my Chemo Lokis and smart bomb them all. And then he was like, all right, fuck it, I'm going to do that. So he basically just told his Harpy fleet, the Horde Harpy fleet, just MWD towards the goons, the Jackdaws, and then just scram their FC, scram their anchor, because obviously the entire fleet is following that anchor, right? They're anchoring on him. So if you scram him and he slows down, they're all going to bunch up in a ball because they're all orbiting him, right? So they got a scram on their anchor. They all balled up, and then I warped in with my Lokis, and I smart bombed the entire Jackdaw fleet, and obviously a good bunch of the Horde Harpies as well. But
killed your own guys.
Yeah, and I also killed some of my own Lokis. Apparently, a bunch of people didn't know how to turn the harness on, so they died too. It was not ISK efficient. We lost like 6 billion Lokis, and we killed like 4 billion Jackdaws, so it definitely wasn't ISK efficient, but it was super fun. Yeah. And the Raitaru actually repaired because all the Jackdaws were dead, so it was a win-win.
It's a nice move. It's like it's like guided bombs, right? Because you're flying the actual smart bomb.
Yeah, Chemo Lokis are very underrated, but they're also they have very limited use. That's why they're not very popular. That's why not a lot of people know about them, because there's only very few scenarios in which you can use them at all.
Yeah, I'm looking here at PF TAC in Venal, and you can see there's just a lot of activity. It's I'll zoom in so you can see. But when you're looking at Dotland, if you're looking at a system, you can see ship kills in the last 24 hours. That's that one. And you can see it's just a lot of, 25 to 50 every few hours. So there's a lot of little fights going on there.
It's hell of a time to be part of that Horde SIG or being part of that Goon SIG for sure. It's basically 24/7 skirmishes going on. Just a bunch of Goon Jackdaws jerking around on the undock of their station that they stage in. A bunch of Horde people warping down there. More Goons undocking, more Horde undocking. Turns into a little brawl. Then 2 FCs show up and start forming each side, and it turns into a bigger brawl. It's pretty cool. It's it's pretty nice. It reminds me of back in like 2012 when Black Legion and Pandemic Legion were staging in the same system. It was basically the same thing.
I'll have to check that out.
It's pretty fun.
All right, cool, man. Well, thanks for that update. It's things are moving fast, a lot faster than I thought it would. I thought this would take a couple weeks, 3 weeks before.
Looks like they're just giving up on Branch, so we're gonna just kill everything that's of any value in Branch now, and then onto Decline it is. I mean, to be fair, there's a bit of a meme. We killed the VFK IHUB actually yesterday.
Right.
The VFK IHUB came out of Reinforce, and we killed it, and now Test has an IHUB there. And obviously VFK is a very historic system. So we were like, oh, VFK by February. Everybody was kind of laughing about it.
Yeah, we told the story of the VFK meme on yesterday's show. We'll get that published today if you listen to the podcast. But yeah, Elise told us how that came to be and why. So yeah, you guys are in Decline already. Because I mean, just a week ago you were saying like, well, one thing at a time. We're taking Tenal now. We're looking to go into Branch, and who knows if we'll stop at Decline. It just looks like you guys might go all
Obviously, some people are going to think that I was just talking shit and we were planning this all along, but I can guarantee you that it wasn't the case. Sometimes things just fall into place. You can't. That's why I keep saying I think like it's not really feasible in EVE to think or try to make plans that are like 6 months in the future. Most of the time, they don't end up working like that because there's so many moving pieces in EVE Online. So, like we tend to plan our campaigns, week by week. Obviously, we think ahead of what might come next, and we have plans in place for multiple different scenarios. But this, for example, like we didn't expect them to just give up on Branch. I thought they were going to try to slow us down a bit more, but again, I get it. They can't contest us at the moment, so it makes strategic sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, the show of force.
Siberian Squad, because that's their home region that they really grew up in, and in Hanzo's alliance updates, which you can find on Reddit, by the way. It's been posted there. It's on the front page. It really, like, you can really read it out of what he wrote that he's not very happy about just giving up branch.
Actual pain. Well, I think what's interesting is that this campaign isn't turning on necessarily strategic wins, but more like shows of force. I wonder if that tells you something about the nature of the game, like, or has it always been this way? When a group shows up and they outform you and they have more
yeah, I mean,
power than you do. If people look at that and say, "Yeah, we can't win, we got to go."
Ever since Fazizov and Citadels, that has definitely been the case. This strategy, because grinding a soft region, like grinding a region with the current sovereignty system, is such a pain when the defender actually tries to defend their space. So the strategy has always been, ever since 2016, to demoralize your enemies so much they just give up and move away, and then you can just grind the whole thing in peace, right? It's still going to be annoying just because of the way Entosis works, but at least you can do it completely uncontested, and you can do it as fast as possible. And that's been the strategy for basically every war ever since.
Oh, that is interesting, those dynamics. Okay, let's see. We're going to go to, let's see, Reddit. Yeah. There's a few things here. We'll go into the news portion. Well, actually, let me go back to statistics just to finish that up. Dotland. I don't see anything here. Silent Company reconstituted. It's a high-sec group that was war decked using a little bit of a loophole in the war deck mechanic. We've talked about that in the last show. Actually, when we talked about Electus Martis? Oh, I forget their name, but the Minmatar RP group that was fighting the Hogs was talking about some of the tricks the Hogs use, and we discussed thoroughly that war deck mechanic loophole. It has to do with a player-owned, well, POCO. What's a POCO stand for? Player-owned customs office. Yeah, anyway. So that group's Silent Company is reforming after having to throw out a bunch of corporations to save them from a war deck. Okay, and so you have Fraternity, picked up 400. Here's an interesting thing that showed up on Reddit, which was Iron Crown. Looks like it collapsed, but they say that Iron Crown is really forming into a corporation. It was an alliance. Now it's forming into a corporation and moving to Goon Swarm, where they can rent in peace. But there's no confirmation on that, so it's a lot of speculation. You know anything about that, Kilby? Oh, he took off. Then we also have Ranger Regiment losing 200, Pandemic Horde losing 200. A lot of these can be cleaning. A lot of them, a lot of times during war, it's stressful and people get mad at each other. So if you're not showing up, that's a lot of times where people purge. Right after decisions have been made about a war, people look around and figure out who stuck it out with them and who didn't. And so you see a lot of purging and that kind of stuff happening. I'm not sure that's what's happening yet, but it could be. I looked at Ranger Regiment. It doesn't have one corporation that left, so it must have been various characters from various corporations. Same with Pandemic Horde. That's going on. All right. Up here we have Circle of Hell, picking up 16 systems, all in Outer Passage. And Circle of Hell probably has something to do with Inner Hell and Outer Hell. Now, I'm not sure what Outer Hell's purpose is. It could be... well, first of all, you have the core of the hells. The last layer of hell is Inner Hell. Inner Hell is a Russian wormhole group that are to be reckoned with, or not to be reckoned with. They are a devastating group that is purging a lot of groups out of wormhole space. So then you have Outer Hell. And Outer Hell, to me, I don't know what they're doing yet. I'll look into that. But they are probably groups that go into nullsec and pick things off, and basically stuff that, basically a SIG of sorts that destroys things in known space as opposed to wormhole space. And then you have what looks like Circle of Hell, and that to me looks like a group of PvE groups. Some people here call them botters. Yeah, there's a whole reputation and all that from Russian, but we won't point any fingers in that way. There's a group of it looks like they're out to harvest in known space, and that looks like it's happening in Outer Passage. Now, what's interesting to me, and I was explaining this earlier, that Inner Hell, either with the Outer Hell label or Inner Hell itself, is doing a lot of attacking in Delve, which is Empire space. And you also see the Circle of Hell posting up in near Fraternity space, which would be like near Oasa, which we'll talk about in just a second. And so I start to think, is Fraternity talking with Inner Hell, and is there some bargaining being made about Inner Hell pestering Goon Swarm and the Imperium? At the same time, they're setting up shop near Fraternity, and it's rather peaceful. Like if there's been some kind of a bargain made there. It's worth looking into, but not sure. Because that would be an interesting thing with a wormhole group as powerful as Inner Hell, to be able to utilize them in Sov warfare. Usually they shun that kind of stuff, but who knows if they've been through the wormholes and not meeting the kind of resistance they want. So maybe they're going to look at known space to see if they can find some targets and some friction, some tension. All right, Blades of Grass, looks like they dropped 12 systems. I don't know exactly which ones those were, but yeah, Outer Passage. So this is a change, and this, I should have seen this first. Blades of Grass is an ally to Fraternity. For them to drop those systems to Inner Hell, that looks like an exchange. It's way too thorough. It's way too thorough, and it's way too fast to collapse. So that looks more like an exchange. And so maybe Fraternity is saying, Blades of Grass, we're going to take these systems and give them to Outer Hell. Sorry, to Circle of Hell. Something's going on there. We're going to have to look into it. All right, I know that there's a lot of information here in chat, so I'm going to take a quick look. All right, mostly criticism. I don't know if any of that is reportable. Thanks, though. I appreciate it. Okay, so there's something else I want to look at here. I'm gonna make some people angry with this, but it's worth looking at. So most of the violence systems in high sec and low sec are your typicals. It's just Black Rise for low sec. A lot of stuff going on there. And it looks like Domain and Metropolis. There's just a lot of stuff in Empire space going on. It's about, I would say, 300 ships destroyed every 24 hours in the top 10 systems. Most violent systems in high sec. Goons were in Udama, so there's a tick up. There's an uptick in the usual amount of ships that are being destroyed. So that's Goon Swarm doing a lot of ganking in there. I was just looking at that. And then if we get to the most active systems for NPCing, and this is where people are harvesting, basically just destroying NPCs for money. And this is what's interesting to me. If I look at these numbers, they are very, very similar to one another, and they're all in Oasa, which would be Fraternity space. So if you're looking at this, the last 3 hours, people are ratting at almost the exact same rate at these systems. And that is just an amazing coincidence, right? I mean,
isn't it?
Yeah, it's a little bit strange. So it's hard to explain. So we don't know what's going on there. I'll talk to people at Fraternity. We'll see.
So, well, I mean, I'll tell you from a forensic accounting situation.
This is Leek Calicus, right? Where are you from first?
I'm from California, so I'm getting ready for work.
I mean in the game.
Oh, I live in Delve.
You're in Delve, okay. Are you part of Imperium?
I'm part of Iron Guard. So we moved down that was Iron Armada when we moved down to join the Imperium.
Okay, Iron Armada, sure. That's what's his name?
Tridget.
Tridget. Tridget's group. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So do you have any information on this? Or what's your assumptions?
I don't have any specific hard facts for like what's happening in Oasa, but what I'll say from a forensic accounting and as a full disclosure, I used to bot in other games, and when you see numbers that get repetitive like that, it's usually a good indication that something is going on.
Yeah. There's no landscape to these numbers. They're almost identical, which means whatever's happening is happening at the same speed or ends up at the same sum. But literally the top 10 systems are all about 12 to 15,000 NPC kills in the last 3 hours. That's a fast clip for a lot of systems in Oasa. Oasa, this is not Chinese prime time either. So that, again, this is the last 3 hours. So I don't.
Yeah.
That's crazy consistent and high volume.
Yeah, consistent on what is clearly ratting in this game is very, very repetitive. Mm-hmm. And so when you have consistent and repetitive, it just sort of leads to a very clear indication that something is going on that either we don't know or they are just sitting there mechanically going through this every single day.
Which is also possible. I mean, you never know. But if you look at the 24 hours, it is also very consistent. So it's not just like at this time of the day, all these systems are firing off at pretty much the same clip. It's like the 24-hour cycle is pretty much the same too, which gives me even more information that they keep up this pace. Now, let's look at that. 3 hours. I'm trying to do my math here, but yeah, at some point it must slow down because these 3 hours have been very, very prolific compared to 24 hours. Interesting. I don't know. I don't want to point any fingers and say that people are using automated bots to farm, but Oasa is on fire as far as bringing in money. And
the other thing of note is how is the EULA worded? Is it unattended botting or is it just botting in general?
I don't know how the EULA. I'm sorry, the EULA or the
user end user license agreement.
You mean the rules of the game?
It's botting in general. Any automated botting in general is illegal.
So if that's the case, then they can't. If they can't use a system that draws information from the game and then executes a source of a set of actions, that is, if that is the wording of it, then yes, what would transpire or what this represents is probably they're botting. If it requires attending, then I guess not. But it's hard for me. It's hard for me to believe that somebody over a 3 hour period can stay consistent like these numbers are showing.
Well,
you cannot use any automated scripts. That means botting. That means macros. That's why ISBoxer was banned, right? Because it's an automated script. Yeah,
I mean, the point is that you have to put choke points in the game, otherwise people become too rich, too fast, it's too distorting. So one of those things is man-hour tax. So a person has to be doing the actions that is creating the income in the game. You can't have the machines doing that because that's an unfair advantage. So whatever the language is, that's the purpose of it. It's to make money making slow down to the point that a person has to be doing the work. Now, some people are just so gung-ho that they can do this 18 hours a day and it doesn't bother them, but other people don't do that kind of stuff. What I'm hearing, though, is that this isn't that big a spread, or 3,000 in the last 3 hours is actually maybe not so not an anomaly. It's maybe more normal. And also, Sugar 2 says that this is about when it starts slowing down. And it will slow down because these systems, well, these are different systems though. Well, you have 4 MIDI. 4TAC M1 is one of the top 10 systems in 24 hours at 40,000 NPCs killed. And that one right now is at 14,000 in the last 3 hours. So, yeah, I don't know. It's very... so they're probably slowing down now because clearly they don't go 24 hours. And that makes me think that it's more of a positive thing. If the 24-hour cycles were essentially breaking down to 3-hour cycles at the same pace, then you would know that it's a 24-hour cycle of people ratting like that. And that is hard to believe because that region is owned by people from one time zone. So for them to be able to do it 24 hours would be very fishy. But since it slows down, it may show you that it's actual living people that are doing it, that have to go to sleep or have to attend to their day or something like that. So there's some evidence. And from what I know, I do know that Fraternity is one of the most active groups in the game right now, and they're becoming one of the most powerful groups in the game, and they're doing it rapidly. I mean, they really.
I think we people from the West, I think we people from the West with jobs and families and stuff, we tend to underestimate how much of a no-lifer some people can be, I suppose.
Well, Sugar 2, I think he's actually Goonswarm, but he says they aren't allowed to go 24 hours by Noros. He tells them to stop. Well, that's interesting. We know Noros, and we can ask him these questions, but I'll have to actually assemble some actual questions and then match his answers.
Yeah,
to
there's some areas that have activity all day long though in Oasa.
Yeah, well, not everybody's from China that's in the.
That's true. Yeah, I actually have an old corp mate who's in a fraternity. So
yeah, and also it's easy to say, if we can basically contemplate that if you go 24 hours at the same pace, you're not a human. They can do that too. So they may actually say, look, we got to wind down for 2/3 of the day, and then the last third you can just go out. So it might. Well,
you build a better mousetrap, you get a better mouse, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. I've actually bought it in a game too. I bought it for advancement. Before I knew it was like something you don't do, because it seemed like everybody was doing it and nobody said it was against the rules. Different game, not this game. And I just, in certain games where you need the progression to get up to the higher level content, it's just something you do. Like nobody questions it. If you don't, you're actually seen as the outlier.
So some games and some gaming companies are they either turn a blind eye to it or they don't mind. And some are very hard on it. CCP has been very clear that they're against any automation of gameplay.
And then you have some games that, to avoid botters or illegal botting, they actually added macros into the game itself. So the game itself has a macro section in which you can program, use this skill, that skill in whatever sequence you want, and the game will keep on doing that sequence. World of Warcraft did that, for example.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so we're not making any accusations. It does look fishy because it's just so consistent across the board. It's all in Oasa. Oasa is just gangbusters. I think they're going to, this next month, I think the January MER. Oh, is that the one that was released already? No, it was December that was released. So January is just not prepared yet, but I think we should expect it any day now, since the January date is closed and we're at 10 days.
They're
now.
Usually like 15.
In the middle of the week, in the middle of the month? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it would be really interesting to see if this is the first time that Delve is second place to Oasa. They essentially were last in December, but Oasa itself was was not the only region that was doing the ratting. But I think this time it's Oasa. It's just going to skyrocket over Delve, and that's going to be really amazing to see that Delve can be overcome by another group, because Delve was such a juggernaut in 2018. Okay. Last thing, we'll go to some news here. Looks like, actually I should just do Tranquility again. Okay, population's getting healthy, 35,000 yesterday. So that's in there with some of the better days of the last year. So the PCU players look like they're doing very well. Mostly coming back to the game. We'll see how that stands up over time. Also wanted to look at some of this stuff. I think this was kind of cool. Somebody released a map that has all the nebulas of the game, but it shows you like their sphere of influence, which I thought was pretty cool. And it also showed you, let's see if we can get to it. Yeah, there's a folder. Oh, this is talking in Stations Nebula. Crosspost. There was a folder that had all the nebulas in it, which I thought was pretty cool too. And then it's talked about the systems don't have any nebula. It's just deep, dark space like branch, decline, and fade. That's those three are in the north. They have no nebulas. Everything else looks like it has something. And then you have some nebula names like the Vapor Sea and the Cauldron. Cloud Ring, of course, looks like a ring. And that information was really cool. So there's also a folder that has all the nebulas in it and what they look like from different places. I, of course, downloaded that because I like that information. You can also see information like that on Eve Tourism. I think that's, let's see, Eve Travel. Should know that. Eve Travel is one of the best sites if you're an Eve player. It's kind of it goes through all of New Eden and tells you all the places to see, and it talks about their history. So there's a ton of lore here, mostly in-game lore. This is put together by Mark726, who's a friend of the show, and he's been doing it for years and years. And he just has like, you know, landmarks in high security space. So if you click there, let's try low security space. It's just a ton of information. If you really wanted to get lost in Eve, that's where you should do it. He also has a lore survival guide that goes with it, and this is why I brought you here. He also has nebulas mapped out by their regions, so you can see what the nebulas look like from different regions. So that's pretty cool. I think astroography is really interesting. And here it is. This is my favorite part of it. Sites by region. So every region, he lists some of the landmarks or space marks, and you can click on them and find out their history. And again, he has stuff that's even disappeared from the game that you can see it crossed out here. It's no longer in the game, but he could tell you about what was there in the past. And this is a very, very big list of all this stuff. Again, that is evetravel.wordpress.com. It's made by Mark726. I always recommend this. I actually did a show based on this where I would just travel to, well, I looked at this site and, you know, and so he and I were talking. I was like, you should do an Eve travel show where you actually take people on a tour to a landmark and talk about it like a travel guide, or not a travel guide, but like a, you know, a tour. And I started doing that, but I started doing that with stuff that he doesn't have, which are battle sites. And so I would go to like BTAC-R. And as I was touring there, streaming, I had a small group of people with me. And I think Mark actually was on that one. And we would talk about the history of the event on our way there. And then when we got there, we would show you around to the different planets. And we did it with Asakai. We took you there with Boat, who was actually one of the key players of Asakai. And we talked about the battle of, what actually happened. And we visited all the little places. And so it was pretty cool. And we went and did the Fountain War. We went to some of the key systems in Fountain. I got destroyed in the middle of that by a smart bombing Tempest, but but I was still able to finish the show by the time I got killed. So yeah, we only did like 5 or 6 of those Eve travel to battle sites and talked about that kind of stuff. But anyway, let's see. PCU up again to 35. Eve London just happened over the weekend. I think our McLeod went there. Our boy McLeod. He's our engineer. And coming up, Eve North, the tickets are now available. Let's turn that on. I don't know if this website is up yet. No, this is Everbright. So you can buy tickets now for this Toronto Fan Fest. Last year, it was part of the world tour that CCP went to. And a lot of people went there because it's a nice middle ground for East meets West for the US and Europe to go to. It's a little easier than Iceland. But it looks like it's going to be June 26th. And this is again in Toronto. So those tickets are now on sale. And I'm sure you'll hear a lot of about it as the days approach. Yeah, that's put together by somebody that works with us here at Talking In Stations. It's put together by Ivy. And also Reload. Reload is now part of TIS2, and they're putting it together that I know of. All right, here's some more information on the Iron Crown. It's just some speculation. Iron Crown may be joining Goons. That's at Alliance Turn Corporation. The significance of this is that they were part of, I believe, Dead Coalition. So it just looks like more fragmenting of Dead Coalition, which is under a lot of pressure right now and in full retreat through Branch to Duckline. So we'll see where they are. And this last thing I wanted to point out, well, actually, last week we didn't talk about this, but Mittani put out a message that was, it sounded like he was talking about EVE Online because he's talking about politics, but he was actually talking about real life politics, and that caused a big stir. But then you also have NazAhGoul, who is actually a Goonswarm player that came up with Peace Be Unto Him. When they talk about, whenever Mittani would talk, people would be PBHU or something, or UH. And he made that up. That was NazAhGoul, and he did a lot of fan fiction. So he actually went to test recently. And so when Mittani did his political rant on Twitter, NazAhGoul actually wrote some fan fiction about it, and you could see that somewhere on Reddit, I think. So that's just some stuff that's happening and that fuses real life with in the game stuff. Yeah, so Naz is now with Suad. Suad is, I should know these names, but it's Assault. Help me out with that name. Something you assault. Suad, I think, is, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I would be mistaken if I talked. Okay. Anyway, so that's NazAhGoul writing fan fiction about Mittani and politics in Reddit. So that's that. This is the last thing for the day. I thought that was very interesting. This guy is a YouTuber, but I think he does various games, but he's doing some really cool stuff with lore. And he makes these little videos that are not getting that much attention. I'm going to actually put this into chat. But anyway, sorry, I was getting a phone call. I had to figure out if I need to answer it. But check out this guy. It's pretty interesting stuff. It is called Sovereign RPG, and he's got a lot of like lore stuff. But I think he's coming from the point of view of echoes, which makes it interesting because the lore might be a little more simplified than it is in EVE Online, where it gets incredibly detailed. All right, so that is everything we have today on Today in EVE Online. We will see you tomorrow. Have a great day.